Hey y'all, new day, new verse as we continue on into Matthew. Today, our new week with a new chapter. I'm looking forward to digging into 14. Friday, we are going to dig into the entire chapter, and I still want to for a reason, because this chapter has 3 sections in it that seem to tell a deeper idea. One that starts out with recognizing where we fail, the grace in those places, and the fact that God has been consistently doing it from go, even when we don't see it. So, as what I wanted to dig into is a little overview. Let's dig into chapter 14. Here we go. When Herod Antipas, the ruler of Galilee, heard about Jesus, he said to his advisors, "This must be John the Baptist raised from the dead. That is why he can do such miracles." For Herod had arrested and imprisoned John as a favor to his wife Herodias, the former wife of Herod's brother Philip. John had been telling Herod it is against God's law for you to marry her. Herod wanted to kill John, but he was afraid of a riot because all the people believed John was a prophet. At a birthday party for Herod, Herodias' daughter performed a dance that greatly pleased him. So he promised with a vow to give her anything she wanted. At her mother's urging, the girl said, "I want the head of John the Baptist on a tray." Then the king regretted what he had said. But because of the vow he had made in front of his guests, he issued the necessary orders. So John was beheaded in the prison, and his head was brought on a tray and given to the girl, who took it to her mother. Later, John's disciples came for his body and buried it. Then he went and told Jesus what had happened. As soon as Jesus heard the news, he left in a boat to a remote area to be alone. But the crowds heard where he was headed and followed on foot from many towns. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion and healed their sick. Compassion on them and healed their sick. That evening, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so that they can go to the villages and buy food for themselves." But Jesus said, "That isn't necessary. You feed them." "But we only have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. "Bring them here," he said. Then he told the people to sit down on the grass. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he gave the bread to the disciples, who distributed it to the people. They all ate as much as they wanted, and afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftovers. About 5,000 men were fed that day, in addition to the women and children. Immediately after this, Jesus insisted that the disciples go back into the boat and cross to the other side of the lake, while he sent the people home. After sending them home, he went up into the hills by himself to pray. Night fell while he was there alone. Meanwhile, the disciples were in trouble far away from the land, for a strong wind had risen up, and they were fighting heavy waves. About 3 o'clock in the morning, Jesus came toward them, walking on the water. When the disciples saw him walking on the water, they were terrified, and they feared. They cried out, "It's a ghost!" But Jesus spoke to them at once. "Don't be afraid," he said. "Take courage. I am here." Or, the I am is here. Then Peter called to him, "Lord, if it's really you, tell me to come to you walking on the water." "Yes, come," Jesus said. So Peter went over the side of the boat and walked on the water toward Jesus. But when he saw the strong wind and the waves, he was terrified and began to sink. "Save me, Lord," he shouted. Jesus immediately reached out and grabbed him. "You have so little faith," Jesus said. "Why did you doubt me?" When they climbed back into the boat, the wind stopped. Then the disciples worshipped him. "You really are the Son of God," they exclaimed. After they had crossed the lake, they landed at Gennesaret. When the people recognized Jesus, the news of his arrival spread quickly throughout the whole area, and soon people were bringing all their sick to be healed. They begged him to let the sick touch at least the fringe of his robe, and all who touched him were healed. There are a couple of things there's a lot in each of these sections, honestly. And you can find some amazing stuff from Tim Mackey, The Bible Project, Pastor Stephen Furtick, Bishop T.D. Jakes. You can find a lot of beautiful teaching on a lot of these areas. But one that stuck out to me, like I had iterated earlier, was something more. thinking about those conviction moments, the times we place things on an altar and it snowballs out, this is where God already knows and he has grace. Because Herod, he's supposed to be the Jewish puppet king instilled by Rome. John the Baptist is calling out saying, having an affair, not okay. Affair gets to the point where he ends up marrying his brother's wife, sorry. It all gets a little, icky. It gets icky. It gets really icky. Because he's decided to go from a moment of lust to an affair to causing the separation of that family to now getting turned on by a dance performed by his stepdaughter. Like I said, it just gets kind of icky. If Herod had taken a moment, though, and gone not instead of conviction and, screw you because you're saying I'm doing something wrong, and instead taking a moment and going, wait, am I? Because there are certain things that we instinctually understand are just not okay. We may spend our lives trying to ignore them. There are just some things that we know are not okay. That you have to be willing to follow the beast mentality to do it. And there are moments where you're like, oh, well, how could they go snowballing down into that? I could never do that. It's the same altar as porn. It's just lust. And instead of taking a moment of conviction and correction, instead of saying amen, saying ouch, he turned away. And I think all too often we will. Because we don't want to actually, or don't actually believe that when Jesus says, I love you anyway, we don't really believe it. And I think that's because all that often in our world, people won't love that way. That itself to me speaks to how much we need God's heart in us to show us what love really looks like. That we should be okay coming before the throne and saying, yeah, I whoopsed. Because if you think about it from just a base logic standpoint, how can an all-knowing God not know what you've already done, will do, or are going to do? Kind of doesn't work with omniscience, right? So if God already knows, then why not fall at his feet? Accept the undeserved mercy, the overflowing love. Because Herod, out of fear, imprisoned John, rather than just letting it go or having him killed on the spot. And as he went, eventually got to the point where his head was taken, because Herod wanted to save face. So a life was taken because people don't want to own, Herod didn't want to own the fact that he was doing something he shouldn't. All too often it will dissolve to that. People losing their jobs because a company goes over starts at embezzlement. It starts at that one little bit of, well, the shortcut seems easier. Well, the not way of doing it, I have to get mine after all to get ahead. That's the argument, that's the reason, that's the logic that we tend to take and allow ourselves to use, rather than recognizing that when God says, I already know what you've done and I died for you anyway. Believing that, walking in that grace, walking in that mercy, being washed free, washed clean of our sins by his blood. And if you don't think that Jesus will do it for you, continue on into Jesus feeding the 5,000. Because in this moment, he hasn't just lost John the Baptist, he's lost his cousin Jehoiakim. He's lost somebody who he basically, literally developed alongside until Elizabeth gave birth. He lost family. He lost a friend. More than that, the kingdom lost somebody who was doing an incredible amount of good. Because John was preparing the way. Make smooth the road ahead. Just like we saw earlier in Matthew. And when he is in this place of pain, this place of loss, He sees the suffering that we're going through, and he has compassion. He heals the sick. He frees the demon-possessed. He sees the tears, sheds them with us, and gives us an undeserved respite and love. Even when struggling with that much loss, he still provides. We see in Exodus that God invited Moses into those moments to understand the grief he was experiencing, that the children of Israel were acting the way they were. You don't think it hurts and breaks God's heart to know that his creation image bearers are acting as brutal monsters? I mean, when a parent has two kids that fight, it grieves them. It's the same kind of idea here. And in those places of grief, he still acts as provider. Still shows that it's not necessary to get food from the world. Just thank God and move forward. And he just gives thanks. He takes it, he has people sit down, he gives bread, he breaks it after thanking for it, and passes it out. Blesses it, breaks it, gives it out. He's able to produce manna from heaven. That's who he is, the Son of God. He's God made flesh. And he knows every need. So if he knows the needs of these people who are suffering from sickness and death and demon possession, why wouldn't he provide food as well? Especially since they're getting the real food they need while he's acting. More than that, though, it's not just the fact that he fed them. And a lot of people point out the fact that it's 5,000 people, which with women and children, you're probably looking closer to 15,000 people, give or take, based on population density and reproduction tendencies for the culture and time. You're looking at a huge bounty, and I'm giggling, rolling, nearly bawling in joy at the fact that God is recognizing the one. It's like, yeah, he fed 5,000 men and all the women and children along with. He did it knowing that each one of them needed food. More than that, each one of them had their fill. So he knew not only exactly what everybody needed, he had surplus. Enough to fill baskets that are the size of human beings. 12 of them. Like, that's beautiful provision, and it's given even in a place of trial. Because the people who came to go and meet Jesus, yeah, they're suffering from diseases, they're sick, they're demon-possessed. They're suffering trials. Jesus, losing and grieving over the loss of John, yeah, trials. Through all of it, there is love, there is provision, there is mercy. And after that, Jesus sends them off. He sends them to go to the other side of the lake so that he could take a few. So that he can have that grieving process, praying off alone, like he says to, with his ABBA. In those places where he can just be poured into and pour out completely with his daddy, with our daddy. The God of all creation, the Ancient of Days, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. The God who is very real, very present, and right there with him. Right there with the disciples in the same moment too. Seeing their trouble. It was like, okay, well, if God knew there was trouble, then why did he send waves? Perhaps the wave is there for growth, for understanding. We put these expectations of saying, God, I need you to tell me exactly why this happened, without realizing that we're not able to see forward in time. Maybe the reason it happened now is because of something that will happen later. We put these demands without wanting growth. And, Peter in trust says, please, call me to come out. I'm on there. And yeah, he tells his disciples not to be afraid because, let's face it, it'd be kind of scary to see another human being walking across the water. like that. Not exactly a thing that had been done and isn't done without God. You know? Peter goes out to him, walking on the water because he was called. He gets sidetracked by the wind and the wave. He starts to sink. And Jesus reaches out for him. Save me, Lord. And immediately Jesus reaches in and grabs him out. I think it's beautiful that in this verse here of 30, we see Psalm 18:17 echoed. He sent forth from on high. He plucked me out of deep water. He'll do that sometimes physically, sometimes metaphorically. He's always rescuing. He's always pulling us out of those dark places. So even if we are farther down the path than the Tetrarch there, Herod the Tetrarch was. Sorry, I want to call him a different Herod's name. Even if we're that far down, God still has compassion and will pull us out. Trick is we have to turn around from chasing after that idol, from chasing after lust or greed, gluttony. You know, it's fitting that we have those ideas in our culture of the 7 deadly sins, because they are easy traps. The beauty here is not the fact that we can see the trap. That is very nice. The beauty is that God has grace for us even if we fall into the trap. He gives us the power to walk right over the top of it, unfazed by the storm, unsunk by the waves, unchallenged by the giant, unfelled by the mountain. That we can walk and not grow weary. We can run and not grow tired because we wait on the Lord. When we don't, those moments when we struggle, God loves us anyway. He knows we have those moments. And He gives us the strength to do better. More than that, He learns us how to do better when we come to Him. In complete trust, in complete relationship. Being willing to say, I'm goofed. Don't hold back from that moment then. Let it out. Pour out to the Lord. Because if Agrippa had, or yes, like I said, I keep wanting to call him Agrippa. If Herod Antipas had, would John the Baptist be dead? If we will, what kind of life and beauty can God grow out of that? It's all a matter of, do we want Him or do we want ourselves? Because time's coming when God will say, okay, you wanted yourself, you get yourself. You know, that's not some kind of future prediction, that's just straight revelation. God will act. And every time He does, every day of the Lord moment, that He acts and He shows up and it is powerful. There is a sorting like that. And I am begging anyone and everyone, don't get lost in the thicket. Don't get sidetracked by not willing to say, I whoopsed. Own it. Go to God. Let Him make you a better person. Like I pray He does to me. Because we can't do it on our own. But He's always giving us what we need to do it. Always providing. Always going above and beyond. Trick is our focus. Do we want to do like Herod, Herodias, that entire side of things? The world's way of things, where we want to dive into the world? Or do we want to leave the world behind its way of doing things behind. And live in the world, not of it. Because we've seen the rules of the world. They have not changed. They're still filled with death, murder, sex, drugs, rape, incest. It's not negativity, it's human history. And if history doesn't repeat itself, or at least it surely rhymes, then why do we want to keep dancing to a rhyme and meter that's of a sadistic dance anyway? That's the question. That's the question I toss out, happily. Do you want to really continue to play the world's game? One that has been filled with the same death and, well, I know how to rule these people better, so I'll do it. Okay, Mao. Okay, Hitler. Really, Che Guevara. Pick. The history is full of examples of people who decided, I want to do it my way, ruling alongside the spiritual principalities of this world. I shall make my government their god. I shall make finances their god. I shall make sex. No. That is the world way of doing it. We don't have to. And if they're struggling with it, own it and go to God. He sets all things new. He sets the prisoner free. He breaks every chain. So go to Him. Let Him break those chains. Let Him set you free. So that you're not just able to walk on water, you can run on air. So that in the face of every giant, you can say, my God is greater. And in the face of every trial, you can know that the Lord's got you. He did then, He has now, He always will. I'll see you guys tomorrow as we start chapter 15. May His favor be upon you. Know that you are loved. And let me know what you think about doing the chapters in one. I wanted to pour out that entire flow that I see there. From sinner to falling at His knees to saved. All because we put down our way of doing it and try His. All because we put down everything else off that altar and just put the one who's meant to be there in the first place, God. The center of our hearts, the center of our lives. Because everything else is temporary and will fade. I'll see you then. Hold out hope, because God will see you through. I'll see you.